The dust moved before the sound did. A thin haze rising near the western edge of the village where dry winds brushed the tamarind trees and goats picked lazily at scattered grass. It was early, sunlight still pale, slanting sideways across the fields. Most hadn't noticed at first, but the boy had. He'd paused mid-step, holding a sloshing bucket of water, squinting toward the shimmer in the heat. Something was coming, slow, heavy, silent. What emerged from the low ochre dust was not a herd, not a stampede, not even a lone rogue with raised ears and wide stride. It was an elephant, but barely so. Gaunt and quiet, the great creature moved with the tired, uneven rhythm of something long removed from strength. His ribs showed beneath his thick gray hide, each one clear as stone beneath thin cloth. His left ear hung torn at the edge, a clean slice healed wrong. One tusk had broken off mid-growth, the other curved down sharply, too sharply, nearly scraping his own leg. He did not trumpet, he did not even raise his trunk. He just stopped. Half a step from the fence line, one wide foot lifted and hovered mid-air before settling softly into dry soil. Dust curled around it. Then he swayed. The villagers noticed him slowly, one by one. A woman tending peppers was first to pause, then back away with a soft murmur. A pair of oxen were untethered and led inside. By the time 5 minutes passed, nearly 20 people had gathered, not shouting, not scattering, but watching, waiting. There was something strange in his presence. He didn't advance, didn't back away, just stood, ribs hollow, breathing slow and audible, his entire body seeming to rock gently with each labored exhale. The boy set his bucket down and moved forward a few steps, stopping just behind the line of adults. He tilted his head, watched longer. There was something in the elephant's hind leg, something odd about how he leaned to the right just slightly, shifting weight away from the left. It was subtle, but there. "He's not just starving," the boy whispered. "He's hurt." No one answered him aloud, but a few eyes turned toward the elephant's leg now. Some nodded. A call was made to the small reserve office 2 valleys over. They had a ranger there, someone trained in medical observation. But it would take time. The road was long and unpaved. The man would walk or ride, not drive. The sun climbed slowly, and still the elephant did not move. By mid-morning, more children had gathered behind the adults, pressed against fence posts and tree trunks, their faces full of questions no one had answers for. Some had brought water in metal pans and placed it just inside the fence, though none expected the animal to come closer. He didn't. Flies gathered near his eyes. He swatted weakly with his tail, but only once or twice. Mostly he remained still, his trunk low, tip dragging across the dirt now and then like he was drawing something with breathless effort. His eyes stayed half-lidded, but they did not close. When the ranger arrived, sweat soaked his shirt. He did not speak at first, only looked. Then he crouched low and examined the prints leading toward the fence. Wide, deep, then shallower, clearly uneven. The left side pressed less into the dirt. He stood again. His voice was soft. "There's an old wound somewhere, possibly a snare." No one asked why the elephant had come here. That answer, maybe, was already clear. Sometimes the wild does not bring its pain into sight unless there's nowhere else to place it. The ranger approached slowly, hand low, steps careful. He carried no weapon, no rope, just a satchel of gauze, saline, and a worn notebook. He stopped 10 feet from the elephant and waited. The elephant did not retreat, but neither did he engage. Instead, he shifted, one slow step to the side. His weight dipped dangerously, then corrected. Dust rose again, curling around his legs. The ranger caught a glimpse of something, just above the left hock. A dark streak where skin folded unnaturally, swollen, dried blood, fly-blown edges. He spoke quietly. "We won't touch him today." "Not unless he asks." The boy sat nearby with his chin on his knees. The elephant hadn't once raised his trunk. That worried the ranger more than the limp. In the afternoon heat, some men drove down barrels of water, placing one far enough inside the field's edge to be reachable if the animal chose to move. Bananas were left beside it, some peeled. He didn't move. He didn't leave. By dusk, his shape had become a part of the landscape, a tall, unmoving monolith at the edge of cultivated land. A few brave goats wandered past without alarm. The children were told to go home. Fires were lit, not to drive him off, but to mark presence, to make the night known, familiar. something the wild could see and respect. The elephant swayed again. A woman near the fire whispered, "He's exhausted." Another added, "No. He's waiting." That night, no one slept well. The village breathed in time with the animal. Every small noise was checked against memory. Was that the wind or a footstep? A shifting weight? A groan? At midnight, a soft thump echoed once, like something heavy settling slowly to the earth. No one checked. Not then. In the early gray light of dawn, the ranger rose and walked to the edge of the field. The elephant was still upright, barely, but his trunk had moved. A long drag through the soil showed where he'd reached toward the water but stopped short. Not quite near enough. The ranger placed another bucket closer, but still respectful. When he returned an hour later, the bucket was empty. A fly buzzed near the elephant's eye, and this time he lifted his trunk. Not high, not strong, but enough to brush it away with a soft, slow motion. It was the first gesture of self-care. By noon, the sun returned strong. The elephant stood through it, unmoving, still, swaying. But something in the way he shifted, just slightly more toward the left, then back, told the ranger a decision was near. He whispered aloud, as much to himself as anyone nearby. "He knows we're not here to take." He knows. Later that day, the ranger sat beneath the tree nearest to the field and wrote a few lines in his notebook. He did not document facts, not then, just fragments. Weight shifted left, eyes half closed but tracking movement. No aggression, no retreat, no sound. Still waiting. When dusk came again, the elephant lifted one foot and placed it forward, inching closer to the water. No one cheered, no one moved, and just beyond the dust where he now stood, his shadow stretched long across the soil. For the first time, it reached past the fence. The elephant had not left. By the second morning, the shape of his body had become familiar, even grounding. The way he stood, broad but frail, quiet but enduring, made him seem less like a stranger and more like something the land itself had carried forward. Children stopped glancing nervously. They watched now with quiet wonder, even reverence. The boy who first saw him came again, standing in the same spot behind the line of tamarind trees, watching how the wind tugged gently at the frayed edge of the elephant's torn ear. It had begun to smell faintly near the fence. Not foul, not yet, but sharp, metallic, decay touched by sun. The ranger noticed it first. He stepped closer, kneeling beside the tracks in the dust, tracing them backward with his eyes. There was no blood trail. But there was something else. Flies, gathering high on the back leg. Not swarming, but persistent. They clung to a single fold of skin that seemed darker, more swollen. The ranger leaned forward, keeping his posture low, his gaze downward. Respectful, deliberate. The elephant did not flinch. Still, the ranger stopped a few feet short. He turned his head slightly and motioned for the man behind him to pass forward the soft lens monocular. Not binoculars. He needed one eye free to watch the elephant's posture, the tilt of the trunk, the ears. Through the lens, the wound became clear. A thick band of tissue, nearly grown over, ringed the upper rear leg just above the joint. Skin had folded in on itself, attempting to seal. But the healing was incomplete. Infection had bloomed underneath, pushing pus toward the edge like a slow breath beneath bruised skin. At the very center of the wound, a glint. Metal. Not a full trap, just the hook. A rusted fragment, thin and cruel, likely broken from a snare laid months ago. Maybe more. The wire was gone, but what remained had grown deep inside, invisible until now. The ranger lowered the monocular. "It's been there a long time," he said softly. "His body's tried to heal, but it's poisoned him slow." The others stood still. "He walked here," the boy said behind him. "All the way like that." The ranger nodded. Once. Late in the day, a second ranger arrived from the reserve. She carried sterile gauze, chlorhexidine, and sedative if needed, but no tranquilizer rifles, no darts. Not for this. They would not force him down. If treatment came, it would come on his terms. The elephant had stepped closer to the water barrel. His trunk draped over the rim now, sipping slowly. His eyes blinked more often. Not in alertness, but in weariness. His weight still leaned to the right, but less than before. A small crust of mud clung to his left side where he'd likely tried to cool himself, then stopped halfway through the motion. A plan formed, quietly, over leaf mats and folded field papers. Each ranger would move at different intervals. No sudden approach. One would offer scent-soaked cloth with diluted antiseptic, placed gently near the water. Another would sit at a distance, reading aloud, low and even, just to let voice become part of the air. Nothing that resembled command, only rhythm. They would wait to see what he tolerated. The villagers helped carry branches and shade tarps to the edge of the field, forming a low windbreak. Not to trap him, just to soften the air, to keep insects down, to ease the heat. The elephant stayed. 3 days passed. On the 4th morning, he allowed the female ranger to step within 6 feet. She didn't reach for him. She crouched and let the silence fill the space. He turned his head slightly, not toward her, not away, just enough to acknowledge. When he lifted his leg to shift weight, the wound wept. A slow, syrup-thick ooze rolled down the inner crease. The smell reached her then, stronger now, closer. She murmured gently, not words meant for translation, just a sound, low and steady. The boy, standing farther off, pressed his palms together. That evening, they prepared a shallow poultice, crushed neem and cooled boiled water soaked into cloth strips. It wouldn't penetrate the wound, but it might soothe the surface, reduce the flies. It was placed near his path. If he chose to brush against it, that would be enough. He didn't. But he didn't avoid it either. At dusk, he moved 2 full steps, closer to the shaded side of the field, near the logs arranged for shelter. As he passed, his flank brushed the hanging cloth. The neem smeared faintly across his skin. He paused, and stayed. That night, the ranger wrote in her notebook, "Still upright, still silent. Let us near." The wound had not worsened, but it had not improved. On the 7th morning, they tried something else. A shallow stone bowl was placed near the resting area, filled with warm saline and soaked gauze. Alongside it, pieces of sugar cane, fresh and cracked, a quiet offering. The elephant ate the cane. Then, as the wind shifted, he leaned slightly back, resting more of his weight on the left than before. The gauze stirred beneath him. One hung loosely from his leg after he passed. It stuck there until nightfall, fluttering like a soft, white flag in the warm breeze. The next day, they tried again. This time, the female ranger approached with clean bandage strips rolled into a low clay basin. She did not look at the wound. She did not speak. She sat with her back to him and waited. 20 minutes passed. Then she heard it. A soft breath, a closer shuffle. When she turned, he was there. Not near enough to touch, but nearer than he had been. His eyes blinked. His trunk hung low, not limp, but lowered in thoughtless rest. The angle of his left leg showed weight placed more evenly now, if only for a moment. She whispered, "We're not here to take." He didn't respond, but he didn't move away. Later that day, they saw him kneel. It happened slowly, over many minutes. First, he lowered his back leg slightly, trembling with the effort. Then, inch by inch, the front followed, until he rested his chest low to the ground and his trunk curled over his tusk. The wound opened, fully visible now in the angle of his bend. The ranger did not move to treat. But she looked deeply and understood what would be needed. A future visit, a careful cleaning, possibly extraction, possibly more. But today was only about permission. That night, the elephant stood again under a thin moon. His silhouette no longer seemed like a relic, but a living thing again. The boy saw it from his window and whispered aloud, as if answering something not yet asked. "He's letting us in." The wind shifted gently through the trees. Somewhere far off, a bird called once, then fell silent again. The night returned to stillness, and the elephant did not leave. The morning came with a softer wind. Leaves on the tamarind trees shifted in slow, uneven turns, and the soil beneath the elephant's feet showed signs of deeper settling. He had stood in the same place for hours, half a day or more, still breathing, still watching. But the sag of his shoulders had deepened, and when he blinked it took longer for his eyes to open again. It was the ranger who suggested the trench. Not for capture, not for control, just relief. A shallow crescent would be dug into the red clay near where the elephant rested, filled not with stagnant trough water, but with something sweetened, water and crushed banana, softened and stirred until it formed a loose yellow mixture the consistency of rain-thinned porridge. The idea wasn't medical. It was maternal, something that could be consumed slowly, easily in place, Without forcing the elephant to lift his head too high or move more than necessary, the villagers helped without needing instruction. Men brought tools, children gathered dry banana skins from homes and laid them in neat piles. The women pressed ripe fruit by hand, squeezing them into wide woven baskets where the pulp could settle into juice. There was no rush. Every motion felt shaped by rhythm, not urgency. By midday, the trench was ready, only a few inches deep, lined with clay to hold the mixture. A hollow in the shape of a crescent moon. One edge was left lower so the elephant could reach without stepping too far forward. He did not approach it at first. The water rippled gently as it was poured, and the scent of banana moved on the air. Thick, sweet, faintly fermented. For a while, the elephant stood exactly where he had, watching it with heavy-lidded eyes. His ears fluttered once against flies, then stilled. The ranger said nothing. He sat cross-legged just beyond the trench with his hands resting on his knees. The boy watched from under a low fig tree, barely breathing. Then, after nearly 20 minutes, the elephant moved. It wasn't a full step, just a shift in his body. A tilt forward, a slight bend in the right front leg, enough for weight to press down and the opposite leg to lift. He paused midway, trunk dangling, then placed his foot ahead, near the trench's edge. A second foot followed. His trunk dipped, slow as a falling branch. The tip touched the water. He drank. Not all at once. Just a taste. A curl. A lift. The liquid dribbled slightly down his chin. He paused, then drank again, and again. The boy exhaled. So did the ranger. What followed wasn't dramatic. The elephant did not trumpet, did not lie down, did not gesture in thanks, but he stayed. He drank until the water turned shallow and the banana bits floated like soft yellow petals along the surface. When he finished, he stepped back, but only slightly, just enough to let his weight settle. Then, for the first time since he had arrived, the elephant rested. It wasn't a collapse. It was intentional. His hindquarters lowered with care, one joint at a time. Then his forelegs followed, folding gently until his great head tilted down, trunk curled loosely into the hollow between his feet. His eyes closed. The ranger stood, finally, and walked backward from the field. Not turning away, just giving space. The boy whispered, "He's tired." The ranger nodded. "And he trusts us enough to show it." That afternoon, the air grew warmer. Clouds passed slowly but offered no rain. Flies gathered again but were kept at bay by gentle swats of palm fronds from children perched at a distance. One woman placed bundles of lemongrass near the edge of the trench, letting the scent waft upward, sharp and bitter to insects, soothing to those nearby. The elephant remained resting through most of the day. His breathing was steady, not fast, not strained, just deep, long pulls of air into lungs that had carried pain for too long. By late afternoon, a problem emerged. Hyenas. The ranger spotted their prints near the ridge above the far side of the field. Fresh, light, not yet bold. But they would return, especially if night came and the scent of infection carried farther. The village had seen this before, weak animals drawing danger. It was not a cruel pattern, just natural, but it needed to be met with protection. So, that evening, fires were lit again. Not the wild kind meant to drive animals off in fear. These were small, tended carefully, placed in a circle at the field's edge, low to the ground and stoked with green branches to create smoke. It would confuse scent, dull the signs of weakness, and mark the space as occupied. The elephant did not flinch at the smoke. His eyes opened once as the fires were kindled, then closed again. One of the older villagers said softly, "He knows the fires aren't for him." The ranger looked toward the hills. They're to keep what follows from coming too close. The flames flickered late into the night. They cast long, waving shadows across the ground, sometimes touching the elephant's side in moving light. He didn't stir. The trench was refilled once more, though no one expected him to drink again until morning. In the quiet of that evening, the boy returned to the edge of the field with his father. They stood in silence for a long time. Then the boy asked, "Do you think he had a herd?" The man didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "They don't walk this far alone unless something's missing." Behind them, the trees swayed slightly in the cooling wind. The night sounds were softer than usual. Even the insects seemed muted. By midnight, the fires burned lower but steady. The ranger stayed awake beside one of them, jotting notes into his book. Drank, rested. no distress, no movement away. He paused, then added, "He needed this place, and we became it." Farther off, the elephant shifted in his sleep. One foot twitched faintly, just once, and all around him, the light flickered like a quiet breath. 2 nights passed without movement. The elephant remained near the crescent trench, rising each morning with effort, resting again by dusk. He drank less now, but more often, taking smaller sips, not gulps. His eyes stayed clearer. The swell of infection no longer drained, but held steady. No worse, no better. A pause in decline. The villagers had settled into a rhythm around him, replenishing the trench, tending soft fires at night, speaking less, moving slower. The ranger continued his notes. The boy rarely left his watching place beneath the fig tree, but on the 3rd night, something changed. It began just after sundown. A low breeze carried from the east, strange in direction. It stirred the taller scrub near the field's far edge, where the grasses gave way to denser brush and the old path wound between dried thorn and twisted acacia. No one stood there now. It had been weeks since anyone ventured deep beyond the outer grove. The sound came faintly at first. A cry, but not sharp, not a bird, not a hyena, not familiar, a soft, strained trumpet, so thin it almost wasn't one. Then a rustle, then silence. The ranger stood from his seat by the trench. The boy noticed, too. He stepped forward, gripping the woven fence. "Did you hear it?" The elephant had heard. His ears did not rise fully, but they twitched. Once, then again. A long pause followed, then, from the brush, movement. It came slowly, half-collapsed, stumbling. At first only a shadow against deeper dark, then shape, then outline, then certainty. A calf, no older than a month. Its skin hung loose over bone, ears too large for the narrowness of its face. Its steps were unsteady. One leg dragged slightly, ribs lifted and dropped with each breath like bellows near breaking. It blinked against the firelight, paused just outside the first ring of shadows. The boy's voice caught. He wasn't alone. No one answered him. The calf stood still for a long moment, then took 2 steps forward and froze again. It made no sound now, just looked, first at the trench, then past it, toward him. The older elephant had risen, slowly, with a visible tremor, first one leg, then the other. His trunk hovered, suspended in air. Then he rumbled. A deep, low tone, not loud, not forceful, but rich, ancient, a sound that reached across the air like touch. The calf cried back, this time louder. A short, broken burst, as if the effort cost more than it gave. The ranger took 1 step back. "He brought us here," he said softly, "not for himself." The older elephant took a step forward. Just one. His body swayed with it, but he didn't fall. His trunk lowered. He didn't reach for food or water. He didn't press toward safety. He stepped between the fires and waited. The calf moved then, slow, deliberate, 1 foot after another, shaking with each pace, until he reached the open part of the trench and stopped. His trunk twitched, unsure. He looked small, not just in size, but in presence, as if he hadn't yet grown into the shape of survival. The older elephant lowered his head. They touched, just once, trunk to trunk. No more sound. Then the calf collapsed. He didn't faint, didn't crumple. He folded down the way a child sleeps when no longer afraid. Knees first, then belly, then his head tucked toward the curve of the larger elephant's chest. The villagers did not move. The ranger crouched. The boy wiped his cheek with the back of his sleeve. The firelight flickered across both bodies now. The calf's thin side rose and fell in short, rapid rhythm. The older elephant breathed slower, longer, as if lending part of his stillness forward. That night the fires were widened. A larger ring, more space, not to push them inward, but to make room. The smoke moved upward. The sky stayed clear. By morning, the calf had not stirred. The ranger knelt near the trench and looked closely. The calf's breathing was still shallow but consistent. No marks of trauma, no visible wounds, just hunger and distance. "How far did he come?" one man asked, barely above a whisper. The ranger's response came slowly. "However far his father did." But likely not side by side. Later that morning, tracks were found along the eastern path. Small, prints, uneven, winding, hours apart from the large ones, meaning the calf had followed but not directly. He must have lagged behind, lost sight more than once, then found it again. The boy said what no one else had. He wasn't bringing himself to safety. He was leading someone else. That afternoon, the elephant didn't eat. He stood beside the calf, occasionally shifting his weight, occasionally resting his trunk across the smaller body's back. Each time he did, the calf responded with the faintest flick of his tail. When water was poured into the trench again, both drank. The calf drank in quick bursts, then paused, overwhelmed. The older one paced himself, letting each sip sit before taking the next. A new shelter was built beside the trench, not walled, not closed, just palm fronds and wood slats arranged to offer shade. The calf lay beneath it at dusk, curled near the base of the older elephant's front legs. When night returned, so did the fires, but this time their light caught more than one body. The ranger sat alone, taking notes again. He kept the book open longer this time. Pages fluttered in the wind before settling. Then he wrote. Another came. A calf, alive but barely, followed his father's trail, not abandoned, delivered. He paused, then added, The reason is clearer now. Beyond the field, the trees shifted. Somewhere deeper in the dark, a single call echoed. Not a threat, not a welcome, just distance being named. And in the center of the quiet ring of firelight, the two elephants stood, one resting against the other, both shadows moving in time with the wind. The rains came late that year, not enough to flood, but enough to turn the dust into clay and the cracked earth into a dark softness beneath bare feet and hooves. Grass stirred green again near the edge of the field, and tamarind leaves thickened with new growth. What had once been a holding ground for pain had become something else, something shaped quietly by patience and breath. The trench was no longer needed daily. The older elephant drank from the larger trough now, placed farther out toward the tree line. He walked to it without prompting. Slowly still, but upright, each footfall steadier than the last. The swelling in his leg had receded. The snare wound no longer drained, though the skin around it would never be smooth. A deep, permanent ring remained, but it had closed. Twice each week the ranger cleaned it, never rushing, never restraining. The elephant would not kneel, even now. But he did not retreat. He let them come, let them touch, and he stayed. The calf, smaller still but no longer fragile, had learned to mimic him. He drank when the older one drank. He walked when the older one walked. He followed closely but not blindly. In his own way, he watched too. The boy noticed this. From his usual place at the edge of the field, he marked each change not by growth in size, but by movement. How the calf, no longer, stumbled when he stepped. How he no longer cried when the older elephant left his side for water. How he began to stretch his trunk toward the tamarind bark, pressing his weight forward to test if it would peel. The village moved with the same rhythm. Quiet, consistent. Every day at dawn, someone came to lay a line of crushed fruit near the shade hut. Midday, water was stirred with neem to keep flies low. In the evenings, the fire rings were lit smaller now, more symbol than shield. Weeks passed, and then one morning they were gone. No trumpeting, no turn of the head, no pause. The field was empty. The ranger arrived at first light, surprised by the stillness. The boy had arrived earlier, already kneeling in the spot where the trench used to be. His hand moved slowly over the ground. They left, he said softly, sometime after dark. There were tracks, clear ones, 2 sets, one broad and even, pressed deep into softened earth. The other smaller, lighter, less practiced, but sure. The direction was unmistakable, east, toward the boundary of the protected reserve. The ranger followed them a few paces, not to track, but to understand. There had been no struggle, no hesitation in the prints, no circling, no collapse, only motion forward, side by side. Then he saw it. Near the final bend in the path, resting beside the old watering trench, lay the snare. Not the fragment embedded in the leg, no. That had been removed a week earlier, rusted thin, left in a sealed container for future study. This was a different piece. A full loop of twisted wire snapped and bent, half buried in soil. It had been brought back, placed, a gesture. The ranger knelt beside it, picked it up with both hands, ran his fingers along the curve where the break had come. It was clean, precise, not the work of humans. He whispered. He left it here. The boy stepped beside him, said nothing. Behind them, the field lay still, but the space felt full, echoing with the memory of movement, of breath, of steps taken one after another until the way forward no longer required witness. The villagers gathered slowly as word spread. No one panicked. No one rushed to follow. They stood at the edge of the path, hands folded, heads turned toward the hills. Some smiled. A few lowered their eyes. One woman placed a fresh banana near the water bucket, even though there was no longer anyone to drink from it. Days passed. No return. But the signs were there. Rangers from the Eastern Reserve reported 2 elephants spotted near the tamarind grove at dusk, one large with a distinctive tusk curve and healed left leg, the other young, healthy, still thin, but alert. The pair had not lingered. They moved together, paused at the water edge, then disappeared again into the deeper scrub. At the village, the fires were lit one final evening, not as a ward, but as a farewell. Small children placed stones around the edges, marking the place where the trench had been. A tiny crescent of earth outlined in white. The ranger left the broken snare where it had been dropped. He placed it atop a flat stone and set a single stick of neem beside it. It would rust fully now, disappear. Later, he opened his notebook for the last time. They left together. No prompting, no guide, only morning light and open space. The calf walked upright. The father watched the path. He closed the book, did not write again. The boy sat beside the fig tree for one last afternoon. In his lap he held a smooth stone, one that had once lined the trench. He rubbed it with his thumb. The breeze shifted. He looked toward the trees, said nothing, and in the distance, beyond sight, 2 shapes moved through the grass, one broad, one small. No footprints remained to follow, only a memory of where the earth had once been pressed down, and the grass had parted for those who walked toward green.